My dentist groomed and exploited me, and I didn't even realize it at the time. It didn't start with flirting. It didn't start with anything obvious. It started with a power imbalance that he took full advantage of. This isn't a story like the one where the girl fell in love with her psychiatrist. The line not only gets crossed, it gets completely obliterated. I know narcissism is a big hot topic on TikTok and on social media. I can tell you that I had zero idea of what narcissistic abuse really looked like, and it wasn't until years later through therapy that I found out that what I had experienced was narcissistic abuse. And so today's story is going to be a true story of what real narcissistic abuse looks like. When I was 30 years old, I was at the start of my IT career, and I was making just enough money to not be on welfare, but not enough money to afford expensive things like dental work. Every dentist I went to told me that the only thing they could do is implants, and it would cost me about $30,000 to get the work completed. In addition to that, I was having some other medical issues that had to do with my hormones, which required me to have surgery, and then I was placed on some pretty heavy hormonal medications that caused a lot of facial hair, acne, weight gain, and hair loss. And so I was not feeling very good about my appearance, especially with the broken teeth. And to make matters worse, my boyfriend at the time was cheating on me. And we worked in an office together. So I was finding out from everybody in the office that he was cheating on me. So I, needless to say, was not having a good time. At the time, I was working really hard to better my life for me and my child. Like I said, I was a few years into my career and really on a good path towards becoming successful, but I still had things that I needed to work on with myself, like my choices in men. They were definitely better than what they were, but I still knew that I deserved better. I just didn't know how to get better and what better really genuinely looked like. So at one point, my teeth situation got so bad, out of desperation, I reached out to somebody I knew that was a dental assistant, and she knew a dentist that worked out of his garage. And I know what you're thinking, and yes, I was absolutely terrified over the idea of going to somebody who worked out of their garage. But at the time, I was so desperate because of the pain that I was in. If you've ever had an exposed nerve and a broken tooth, you know exactly what I'm talking. The day that I was supposed to see this dentist, I get a text from him asking me if I know where I can get him some. Of course, he asked that question. He is a dentist that works out of his garage. What else would you expect? And then two, this guy obviously has a substance abuse issue, and I was putting myself in a position where I was going to allow somebody to work on my teeth who had a substance abuse issue. And the idea of that was just absolutely terrifying. And then three, what about me made this guy so comfortable to ask me a question like that? And immediately in my head, I told myself it's because I probably look like a drug addict. And I was very insecure about my teeth. Anyone who's ever had broken teeth or issues with their teeth knows exactly what I'm talking about. People will automatically make assumptions that you have poor hygiene or that, you're on drugs, things like that. And in my case, it just wasn't the case, and I was just so insecure. And now on top of that, I was very upset with myself because this was yet another situation that I put myself into out of desperation that really backfired on me. And I felt really angry with myself for potentially getting myself into a really bad situation. So my son's grandmother tells me that I should go to, I will call them the Walmart of dentists. And I was very hesitant because I thought that the same thing would happen when I go there, that they would tell me that I need $30,000 worth of work. And I was just exhausted emotionally and in so much pain. I just didn't want to deal with it. But I had to, so I booked the appointment same day, and it just happened to be the same time that I was supposed to go to this garage dentist. Intuition and gut instinct are very, very strong tools that we all have. We just don't know how to use them properly. At the time, I was not in a place where I knew how to interpret my intuition in the right way. Well, I'm going to be telling this story from the interpretation that I had at the time so that you guys can see and understand how easy it was for me to fall into this trap. But I want to be clear here. In no way, shape, or form was what I experienced love at first sight, deja vu, some sort of connection. It was my gut instinct telling me there was danger. And as I'm walking past, there's a man in my peripheral who is on his phone like this, scrolling, and him and I catch eye contact like this. And it stops me dead in my tracks. There was something about this man. At first I said, do I know him? Do I recognize him? And I felt like he was looking at me like he recognized me as well. And we just looked at each other. I didn't know what was happening at the time. When it happened, my brain immediately froze. And I felt like I was experiencing deja vu. Like I knew him, I had been here before, he was familiar to me, but I just didn't know how. And because it happened so quickly and so intensely, I started to get nervous and I kind of froze. And so the dental assistant guided me to my chair. I sat down and my brain was just spinning, like just spinning while I'm looking at this picture of a girl in braces in front of me. And then as I am trying to understand what was just happening, he comes and sits next to me. And he has a very forlorn look on his face. He was a very, I guess you could say, petite man. He was very thin, very fragile looking, very sad looking. He was forlorn. And he had a very unenthusiastic tone, like he was irritated that he was getting a patient that needed a lot of work at a later time in the day. And you can hear the annoyance in his voice and his tone. And I had already had a really horrible day. So I just tell him, look, I don't need you to sell me a car. I just need you to fix this whole situation here. He immediately snaps on me. And as somebody who's been around hyper aggressive men, I knew to just shut my mouth, right? So I shut up, I opened my mouth, I let him do his thing. And he starts to do his thing like F5, blah, 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 blah. And then he proceeds to tell me, yes, implants are great, but they're not the only option. There are more affordable options that your insurance will mostly cover, and we can finance it. And so the work that he was going to do was a fraction of the price of what I had been quoted by every other dentist. And he was doing something that the other dentist said that they couldn't do. Why is he saying he can do it when they said they couldn't do it? Is he's either a fantastic dentist or a horrible dentist, right? So I was still nervous, but I was excited because he was giving me an option that I was not provided before. So I signed and he got started on the work. And as he gets started, he realizes that I'm not numbing as quickly as most people do. And so he mentions that a lot of times that's a genetic thing and it could be related to a genetic disorder, which he turned out to be absolutely right. But he then goes to say that when I'm with him, he never wants me to feel pain. And at the time I was like, that's a nice comment, but I didn't really think anything of it. It just wasn't something that crossed my mind at the time as inappropriate. As he starts to work on my teeth, he starts to tell me that he can tell that the issues that I was experiencing were not because I had poor hygiene. He could tell that I brushed and flossed and that it wasn't obviously drugs, and that it's very common to see these types of things in people who just didn't go to the dentist growing up. And so he told me, it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself for this. And I felt so validated, you guys. I felt so validated. You have to understand, as somebody who has had a rough life, I have had not the greatest experiences with people of authority like dentists or doctors or even teachers. And it felt so nice to have somebody that would typically talk to me like a human being. And he was so knowledgeable and so good at his job and so gentle. I felt so good. Like I just found like the best dentist on the planet. And you're probably thinking to yourself, he sounds like a really good dentist. And I want you guys to hear this, and I want you guys to feel this because it's very important for the story. Grooming isn't something that just happens to children. I'm not saying that this initial visit was him intentionally grooming me, but this is how it started. So as he's doing the work, some guy approaches him and he is hovering over. Mind you, I have my mouth wide open and this guy's got a drill in my mouth asking how much longer, when are you going to be done? And the dentist just like stands up and gets in his face like, you need to back off and you need to get out of here. And just very hyper aggressive. Like it was like 0 to 100 really quick. And at the time, I liked it. I did, because I felt like he was being protective And in no way in my mind did I read that as unprofessional or a red flag. Continues to do the work. Mind you guys, I have about 3.5 hours worth of work that he has to do that night. And the whole time he's just cracking jokes, being silly, being charming. He had a very, very, very charming personality. The best way I could describe it is James McGill from Better Call Saul. I mean, he was just this big personality, the type that lights up the room, walks in very grandiose, right? And just funny, right? And I felt so comfortable. I felt so comfortable that my whole body just relaxed completely. Like the whole time I was like this, you know, and then just this layer of just relaxation and calmness came over me. Like I felt so safe with him. And let's not pretend like getting dental work done is not absolutely nerve-wracking. I started to feel this overwhelming feeling of emotions that came over me. And I didn't know why I was feeling them, but I felt very vulnerable and very emotional. And I started to cry. Now, I was very embarrassed over the fact that I was starting to cry, and I was trying to hold it in, but the tears were just like falling down my face. But it was silent. And he notices that I'm crying, and then he proceeds to wipe my tears with a tissue. He could have thought that it was because of the position I was laying in. I don't know if he knew that I was crying. Obviously made it worse because I was like, oh my God, dude, like this guy is just so compassionate and sweet. So he finishes the work. I get up and I leave, and I immediately call my sister to tell her everything because I was just so taken aback by the entire day. I mean, it started with this other dentist in the garage asking me for ecstasy, and then it ended with this very surreal experience that I had with this dentist. And mind you, I didn't even know his name. I'm not saying that I was like in love with him or anything like that. I really did not understand what I was feeling. I wasn't necessarily like attracted to him or anything. It was just this very intense, confusing feeling that I did not understand. And so I tell her about it, and she's telling me, you have a boyfriend. I'm like I said, I'm not like saying I'm in love with this guy. I don't even know his name. I'm just very confused. I don't know what I'm feeling. And at the time, I had no idea what transference was. But 100% what I experienced that day was transference. Mind you, he only did the main emergency situation at the top. He did not do all of the work that was needed on my teeth. So I still had about 6 months of work that was needed that was part of the overall package that was being financed. And so I was going into that office every 3 weeks. And obviously, with me getting my teeth fixed and getting like temporary bridge and things like that put in place, I really just had this boost in my confidence. I had pep in my step. I lost weight. My periods came back. I stopped breaking out. I started dressing nice again. I demanded a raise, or I'd quit my job, and I had been there for like 5 years. I was really feeling myself. And I broke up with my boyfriend, and I decided that I just deserved better, right? It wasn't just my friends that noticed the change in me. It was him too. And over time, he started to become flirtatious. And it started with little things. Like, for example, if I was there to see another specialist or something, he would come into the room before the other dentist would come in. I'd be laying down on the chair, and he would just come up to me and like grab my hand like he was going to shake it. But then he would not let go of my hand, but it'd be very tender and soft, and just holding my hand while talking to me and looking me up and down really slowly while he's talking to me, and like looking at my body as I'm laying down in the chair. And it was very obvious, right? But very subtle and covert. But then it started to become more like brazen, right? Where there was a time where I came in and I was walking, and he was right standing straight ahead in the chair that I was on the first visit. And he was just completely dressed from head to toe in like surgery gear. I mean, he had the big old tarp-like tent jumpsuit on with the splash pad on his head and then a mask under it. And he's got like these tools, and he's just standing there with everyone behind him. Like, go to walk by, he goes, oh, wow. And when that happened, I really started to have a crush on him because I felt like he was crushing on me too. And to me, I was like, if I have a dentist that likes me, and I was just used to like these losers liking me, right? And so when you have someone who's like a dentist liking you, and you don't have the tools in your belt to know, what are red flags, to me, I was like, this is good. This is what you're supposed to get, is a guy like this. And I'm not saying I wanted him because he was a dentist. I didn't want to be a loser with a dentist. I wanted to be on his level, right? I wanted to be just as good as him. So I was really pushing myself to get a better job, to make more money, because I wanted to be on his level. He would make comments like, oh, the princess is here, my favorite. Or one day I walked in when it was raining and he said, how do you come in here looking like this when it looks like that outside? And just a lot of little comments like that, right? Then the flirtation started to increase even more. There was one incident where I was laying down and he says, you know what, get up. And I get up. And like I said, he's short, I'm short, we're both small. And he stands me up against the wall. And I'm sorry, this is going to be so cringy when I do this. I know, I feel like doing it. But he gets in my face like this and he says, have you ever dentist, standing up? Just like that, in my face. And he was like this close to me. I don't even know what to say. Like, my face was literally like, but it wasn't just the only thing I noticed. I also noticed that there were times when I went in there where he was very mean to the staff. And it was very hot and cold. There'd be 1 minute where he'd be cracking a joke, and then the next minute he would snap on them. And it wasn't like a, oh, this is just how he is and they're all used to it type of environment. Like, you can tell that it bothered them. And there would be times that I went in there where the whole office would be quiet. I mean, this guy ran the energy of the office. If he was in a bad mood, it was quiet. If he was in a good mood, it was like a party in there. And there was times where I saw the staff on the verge of tears. There were times where he would belittle them in front of me. There was one incident where he was asking one of them a question and he didn't know the answer. I just so happened to know the answer because it was also something that you do in cosmetics. And I had worked in cosmetics before, so I answered the question. The answer, he immediately starts praising me like crazy in front of the guy, like, wow, look at her. See that brain? She knew the answer. She knew the answer. You didn't know the answer. She knew the answer. God, her brain, it's like a diamond. And at the time, I didn't realize either that that was a tactic that they use. I knew that his behavior and the way that he was treating them was wrong. I saw that as a red flag, but I ignored it. I ignored the red flag. And that's where I hold my accountability in this. 6 months worth of work is completed and I go in for my last visit to get my final permanent put on and quiet. And so I was nervous because this was obviously my last visit and this can make or break things. And then he proceeds to ask me what it is that I like about him. And so I knew that he knew that I liked him at this point, obviously. But I went ahead and I told him, I said, I like that you are this big personality, that you're silly and say it like it is, and you're just extra. And I'm a millennial, and at the time we used to say a lot of stupid things like extra, right? Or bae, I used to call him Dr. Bae. That's what I called him to my friends. And didn't know what extra meant, and so I told him, and he laughed, and then he said, extra, huh? And then he says, that's probably why I'm single. And so to me, this conversation was his way of letting me know that he knew I liked him and that he was single. And I, again, did not look at this like a red flag. I looked at this like he was lonely and sad and he just needed love. And I was going to be the person to give it to him. So when I got home, I decided that I was going to message him. And I messaged him on Facebook. I told him exactly how I felt about him and I gave him my number. And I didn't hear back for 2 weeks. And then I get a message from an unknown number. And in this message, he tells me that he admires me too. And it makes him feel so good that I feel that way about him. But because I'm his patient, he can't do anything with me. I completely understood. I was not upset. I understood that he had ethical obligations. And so I wasn't hurt. It didn't make me feel bad, especially because he validated me in that message. And so I just told him, like, I completely understand. It's unfortunate, but I completely understand. Thank you so much for reaching back out to me. I appreciate you so much. And I wish you the best. I don't remember exactly, but it was something along those lines. And then I get another message. And this message, she tells me, yeah, I had a friend who dated a patient, and when things went bad, she reported him and he lost his license for 6 months. And I told him, that sounds terrible. I'm sorry. I would never do that to you, but I totally get it. And you would think this is where the story should end. But it doesn't end here. That was not the last text I got that night. I wish it was the last text I got, but it wasn't. And the last text changes everything. I was feeling really good. And then I get another text. And in this text, he asks me to find him a good girl to bring home. That wasn't a random text. That was calculated cruelty. Somebody in a position of power that you trust, that you are comfortable being vulnerable around, makes you feel good and treats you well and makes you feel special, and then all of a sudden, within seconds, tears you down. It messes with your brain. Your brain cannot understand or grasp the concept of the fact that somebody that you are supposed to trust just hurt you. It hits different than it would in a normal relationship because of that power dynamic. And you start to question yourself. Like, I must have done something wrong to get him to treat me this way. I don't think that he realized that I was going to accept what he said and I wasn't going to be hurt by it. And I think what he wanted was for me to beg for him and to continue begging so he could feel superior, so that he can gain control. And so when they don't get their way through a casual conversation, they will do this to navigate the conversation in the direction that they want it to go. Like I said, in this case, he wanted me to beg for him. For the last 6 months, this man treated me with compassion. He was gentle. He made me feel like he liked me, that we had a connection. And it really changed me as a person, because for the first time in my life, I had somebody who was not an absolute loser treat me like they were into me. And so that to me was perceived as, I can do better. See, this is proof that I am capable of getting a better guy and doing better for myself. And I am better than the guys that I dated in the past. And that all just came crashing down because this good guy just absolutely wrecked me. Not only with the comment, but the way he treated me after, with arguing with me. And I just could not accept it. So I kept blaming myself, saying maybe it was something that I said, maybe it was something that I did. What can I do to fix it? And for the next 2 months, I didn't hear from him or talk to him at all, but I spent the entire time just ruminating on it and what I did wrong and trying to overanalyze the situation. And during this time, I started to notice that there was a page on my Facebook that popped up by the name of God's Given. And God's Given is obviously like the term, like, to you by God. It is a gift from God, right? And so to me, I was like, that is a weird Facebook burner account name. And I was like, it's got to be somebody, obviously, who's got a big ego. And so I was like, sounds like him. And my friends are like, that's a little far-fetched. You think this guy's got a burner account that he's looking on your Facebook from? You know, I knew that if somebody's a contact in your phone, that they'll pop up on your people you may know, especially if they're new contact. But after a while, it goes away, right? And this just stayed at the top of my people you may know for months. And it started to really drive me crazy. I was like, what is going on here? And, you know, I, at this point, feel like I was shifting from a transference crush type situation into full-blown limerence. And I know a lot of people think that limerence is something that happens to people who have borderline personality disorder or ADHD or anxious attachment, but there's also a lot of times where things like limerence can happen in these types of toxic dynamics, especially in situationships, breadcrumbing. things like that. And so it's not just something that people with personality disorders or mental disorders can experience. It's usually like a pattern in that type of situation where this is how they are in all of their relationships. So I, for the first time, was experiencing limerence. Typically what would end up happening with me is I would end up in these relationships where I was definitely the person in the beginning who was more emotionally invested, but as soon as I started to feel like this was going nowhere, I would start to lose feelings for that person pretty quickly, and the relationship would turn into me trying to leave and them not responding well to me wanting to leave, and it turning into this big dramatic, like, long, painful breakup where they're trying to convince me to stay, and I would stay, and then they do it again and I try to leave, and then they would like flip out if I try to leave. And that was just typically the dynamic in my relationships. Obviously still very unhealthy, but it was a lot different than the dynamic and situation that I was dealing with in this relationship. So at some point I decided I was going to take his phone number and plug it in to the search bar on Facebook to see what pops up. And there it was. The God's Givens account was tied to his phone number. And then again, I try to psych myself into saying, well, how do you know that somebody who had that phone number before never like removed the phone number from that account or something? And I was just like, what are the odds of that? What are the odds of it not being him and it just being a total coincidence that this phone number is tied to his account, and it's an account with the names God's Given, and we already know that he's got this like huge grandiose idea of himself. And 3, it's obviously somebody who's going on my social media frequently because it's staying at the top of my people you may know. I decided, because I wanted to be in his good graces so bad, I was going to refer people to him. And so I started to refer people to him, but little did I know he had been removed from the Walmart place because of his personality issues. And I was told this by another employee there. I didn't even ask. They just knew that I had referred somebody who was no longer there. So when I had come in for my next visit, they had told me. And so I started referring people to his new private practice. During this time, he started to become more flirtatious. And I was getting a lot of suggestive texts. And again, I was not the one pushing this. I was very much trying to just stay in his good graces. And I was scared to be overly aggressive in my feelings for him, because I had still felt like maybe that's what had caused him to like snap on me the last time. So I was just going with the flow. Whatever he was putting out energy wise was what I would put out, because obviously I did want him and that was my end goal, but I didn't want to be the one that was going to push him or make him uncomfortable. So I was very, very careful not to overstep whatever energy levels he was at. These days, my friend goes into the office to see him, and that following day, her and I go out to sushi or something, and she had told me that he was telling her things that were very obviously being said with intent for her to tell me. Like, he knew that she was going to come back and tell me everything. So he was saying things very intentionally with that in mind. And so he then proceeded to ask a lot of questions about me, like, where do I live? Who do I live with? Do I have a boyfriend? Where do I work? Just a lot of questions about me. And it was just further validation for me that he did like me and he did have feelings for me, but things just came off wrong in that initial interaction via text, and it was somehow my fault. And so I just continued to do what I was doing. Valentine's Day comes around, and I texted him because I had referred somebody to him for that day and they did not show up. So I apologized to him. He wasn't like upset or anything. He's like, it happens. And then I get a text message from him asking me how my Valentine's Day went. And in my head, I was like, oh, you know? And so I was really excited that he asked me. And so I just made a joke, a little casual joke, took a bubble bath and listened to Lana Del Rey while smoking cigarettes, something along those lines, and just joking. And I get a response back from him telling me that he went on a date with this girl and it's going really well and he thinks he's going to marry her. And I knew exactly what he was doing, and I knew he was trying to get me to respond back upset because he had already told my friend that he wasn't seeing anybody and that he's single and blah, blah, blah. Then he responds back to me again, telling me like he likes me too, but because of his culture, he has to marry within his culture and blah, blah, blah. And I understood that because the last two guys I had dated were of the same culture, and it was very, very common, especially first gen of that culture, to not marry outside of their culture. And so to me, this was him telling me that that's his thing too. And so I was not going to argue with that. I told him I completely understand and that I was already aware of, you know, that being a thing. And that I just hope that the girl admires him as much as I do. And then he responds back again. It's very obvious to me at this point that he was leading the conversation and he wanted it to go somewhere. I was just, out of desperation, was going with the flow. And so then he goes and tells me that he would make a deal with me, that we could do this with each other and have a thing, but that if he ends up getting serious with somebody, and that I would have to understand, and vice versa, and no questions asked, no arguing with it, and that's just the way it's going to have to be. And so I agreed. After I agreed to that, he immediately sends me a message to put in text that I'm no longer seeing him as my dentist and that I'm going somewhere else. And so I did. And he says, great, now we can really talk. And then as soon as he said that, he sends me another message telling me that everything needs to be confidential and that I can't tell anybody or show anybody. All of it's confidential. And then he proceeds to just send me explicit, everything explicit, and then asking me for explicit stuff. I was just so desperate, you guys. And the stuff that I sent this guy, oh my God. I was just so desperate to be with him. I was willing to do whatever. And so he continues to send me the stuff, but in between he'd be like very manic. He would make off comments about my weight, about like my life, or telling me like not to bug him and that he's not going to text every day and I can't be blowing up his phone. But then he'd go back to being explicit again after that. And then after that, he around midnight asked me if I want to go to Jamaica. And mind you guys, I've never been anywhere in my life. I have never had anyone take me anywhere nice. All my friends thought that this wasn't going to happen, right? That this was just me chasing somebody that I could never have. And now he's inviting me to Jamaica. Then he tells me it's like a swingers thing. And I'm a monogamous person. I have nothing against people who have that lifestyle. I'm very much the type of person like, you live the life you want to live if that makes you happy, as long as you're not hurting other people, right? And it's just not for me. And then he tells me like, oh, it's okay. You know, we don't have to like do all of that. But, you know, so he's like, but I need to know right now because I need to book the flight. And mind you, it's like midnight, right? And I have a kid that I need to make sure can be taken care of or stay at his dad's. I have a job that I need to give notice to. And mind you, this trip is supposed to take place in like, I think it was like 4 weeks. I don't remember, but something like that, right? And I don't even have a passport, right? And so I'm like, how? Okay, I agreed to it. And you would think I'm getting everything that I wanted. Like, it's happening. Everything that I dreamt of and hoped for and prayed for was happening. It was happening. Like, today was the day it finally happened. And now he's taking me on a trip to Jamaica. And you'd think that I would just be so happy and just on cloud nine. And on the outside I was. But deep down, I knew in my gut something was off. I knew it. I knew there was something about it that was off. And I ignored it. So the texting continues, everything continues. And then one day he hits me with, are you free tonight? I'm booking a hotel. And so I said, absolutely, you know. And so, of course, I'm very nervous. I don't eat the whole day. And I go to the hotel to see him. And it starts off, he's extremely passionate, like extremely. And we had a great connection and he was very sweet and funny. And affectionate, and it started off very well. And, you know, he starts opening up to me more and telling me more about himself. And then he proceeds to tell me that him and that girl, like, it did not go well on that date. The one that he was going to quote unquote marry, that it was a double date with him and a friend and the two girls, and that him and his friend and the girl that he was with were like making out, having a good time. And this girl just was not showing interest in him, wouldn't even kiss him or anything. And then, you know, he was telling me some of his struggles and stuff. You know, this was a good thing, right? That he was feeling comfortable to trust me and open up to me. And all of a sudden, he just starts nitpicking at me, like criticizing me, like making really rude comments. Like, not perfect. I'm far from perfect. But this guy was like really like, just like, I dated supermodels, and you know, and I don't even know how you can wear heels in your weight. When I dated supermodels, we're only 100 pounds. So I don't know how you do it. And I ignored it, of course, but then he kept going. Like, then he made comments about how I was a bad mom because I was not with my son's father, without him even knowing, you know, had transpired in my relationship with him. And I just ignored it. And then he would make comments telling me, like, why haven't you taken a shower? And I'm like, I just got here like 2 hours ago, right? Okay. And out of nowhere, he wanted to be intimate again. Immediately afterwards, he got up and went into the corner of the bed, wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't look at me, got extremely cold. Like, I had never seen anything like it before. He acted like he was disgusted by me. Like somebody had just gave him the worst news of his fucking life. And I was kind of just like, okay. And I'm like, are you tired? Do you need anything? Do you want me to turn off the lights? No. But then like 5 minutes later got up and like stomped and shut off the light all aggressively. Like he was irritated that I couldn't get up and shut off the light for him. And so I just sat there like this the whole night in the bed. Like at first I like tried to hold him and he like kicked me off of him, and just very cold and indifferent and like just rude. And I did not know how to handle it. I stayed up the entire night. My stomach was like in shambles because I hadn't eaten the whole day, and now I feel like super sick. And I just like could not sleep at all. The next morning we get up and he is exactly the same. Like no change in the behavior whatsoever. And so I try to feel him out, and he was still being super cold with me. I try to lean in and give him like a hug. Would not touch me, would not kiss me, would not hug me, like nothing. And I left, and that was it. And the entire time I kept telling myself, it's in your head, Jenny. You're just overreacting. You're overthinking it, you know. And I didn't hear anything from him. He didn't text me. And I kept telling myself, no news is good news. But I knew in my heart and in my gut, I knew. But at the same time, because he hadn't texted me, I didn't know if this trip was still happening. And I couldn't risk not getting my passport. And then, you know, him spending thousands of dollars on this trip and me not being able to go because I don't have my passport. So I still went and expedited my passport and spent hundreds of dollars. And here's a picture of my passport. You could see like the agony in my eyes. Like, tell, like I was sad, but I was still trying to hold on to like to hope, right? That this was just in my head. And right before the trip was supposed to take place, 5 days before the trip was supposed to take place, I get a text from him saying, got to cancel the trip. And I responded back to him like irritated, but polite and respectful, but firm. Like I said, I knew you were going to cancel this trip. I could tell by the way you were acting in the room. And you knew you were going to cancel the trip, but you waited until now to tell me, knowing that I had to expedite my passport and spend hundreds of dollars. You waited until 5 days before the trip to tell me. And I said, that's pretty disrespectful. And he just had the most coldest, shittiest response back to me, to that text message. And so I responded again, kind of like being like, I demand an answer. Like, why did you treat me this way? Like, how could you treat me this way? And then he kept giving me like these excuses, like saying at first, like the girl had put a tracker on his car, or that somebody recognized him at the hotel and told her. And I was like, you told me you guys weren't together. Like, and she wasn't even interested in you. You think she's gonna put a track? Like, this didn't even make sense. It was like obviously BS, right? And so I called him out on it. Like, That was an absolute asshole move, how you treated me. And then his response to me was to deflect on me for calling him an asshole. And I didn't care. I was like, double down on it, right? I would always still get a response, but they were always very cold and vague and dismissive. And sometimes they just didn't even make any sense. Like, I would get text messages that said things like, life is life, enjoy it or don't. I know I will. Take it for what it is. And they were just very, like a slap in the face. This is it. All of that, all of that, all of that the last year, and this is how it ends. I just could not believe it. I was embarrassed. I felt shamed. I felt disgusting. My self-esteem was at this point now down the drain. He made me feel so disgusted with myself and just gross. And I just fell apart, right? I just completely fell apart. And out of nowhere, like a few days later, I started to bleed. And it wasn't normal bleeding. It was different. I knew something was wrong. And I went to the hospital. So I go to the hospital, and while I'm in the hospital, I'm talking to my friend on the phone, telling her what's going on. The doctor comes and sits next to me, and she tells me that I'm pregnant. And I was like, it's not even possible, because in my head, I'm like, you need to be like 5, 6, 7 weeks pregnant before it'll even show up on a test, right? But she told me that my urine test came back negative, but my blood test came back positive. And so at this point, this was probably, I want to say, about 3.5-ish weeks after the hotel room. And so I am in shock. It was only one night with him, right? But there was no protection, and it was multiple times. So I was still in shock though, nonetheless. And mind you, I told this guy that I wasn't on birth control or anything. So he knew. He knew. And I didn't tell him. I wasn't planning on telling him. And I just kept it to myself. So the doctor wanted me to come in every 48 hours to do HCG tests, to test to see if my hormones were doubling, because if they're doubling, that means it's a healthy pregnancy. If they're not, then that's usually a sign of it being a miscarriage. Within a week, because of the patterns of my HCG levels and the fact that during the ultrasound they weren't able to find anything or any signs of implantation or anything, they were really starting to suspect that I was having an ectopic. So one day I have this nightmare, and in the nightmare he has these claw hands, like a wolf, like paws with like claws, and he goes and hands me a pregnancy test. And I wake up from this nightmare, and I'm in so much pain. Like, I could not even scream because I was in so much pain on my left side. And I had already had some like pain medication that they had given me for the cramps, and so I took some, and I waited, and I rolled out of bed using like the C-section roll. If you've had a C-section, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I drove myself to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, they said, well, there's no way it's an ectopic, because if it was, there's no way you would have been able to drive yourself. And so I said, okay, whatever. And then they take me to do my vitals, and my vitals are off. They run a regular urine test, and the urine test comes up positive. And then they decide to take me to the ultrasound. And during the ultrasound, the tech that I got this time was just a little bit more aggressive with her techniques. And she started pushing really hard all of a sudden on my left side. And I looked at her face, and I could tell by her face that she had found something. Like, you just know, right? And she then flips me on my side and starts going all the way up, like here in my like abdominal cavity, like in here on my back. And I could tell that something was really off. I'm like, why are you up in my back and in my chest when my ovary's down here, right? And so I knew something wasn't good. And then she tells me, hang tight, don't go anywhere, don't move. So she goes into another room, and I'm like texting my sister and my friend, like, something's happening, I need somebody to come here, right? And so she comes back. She then wheels me to a room, and 3 doctors come in the room and tell me that I'm having an ectopic, and it ruptured on my left side, and that I'm bleeding internally, and they need to rush me into surgery. And so my friend by this point shows up and they're getting me all prepped for the surgery. They're putting the IV in, but started pumping me with morphine, which I just happen to be allergic to. And so I started to swell up on my face and my lips. And so then they give me Benadryl. So at this point, I'm on like a muscle relaxer, morphine, and Benadryl. And my friend's telling me, you need to text him. You need to tell him. He's a Christian man. He'll understand. And I was like, no, he's just going to say something mean. And she's like, there's no way. You have to tell him. He has a right to know. And I'm telling you guys, not even my friends could grasp how cruel this man was. And so I texted him and I told him, like, I'm shocked, but I didn't want to tell you, but I am pregnant and it's ectopic. It's not viable. It ruptured and I'm bleeding internally. They're rushing me to hospital right now. Here's my sister's information. If you have any questions, just know that no matter what happens, I can never hate you. And that was what I sent him. And then they took my phone, they took all of my belongings, and then they rushed me into surgery. And during the surgery, they did a blood transfusion as well. But unfortunately, because of all the medication that they had pumped me with, I was having issues coming out of the anesthesia. And so I was not able to breathe on my own. I remember a few times very vaguely, almost like a dream state, them waking me up and yelling at me to breathe. And then I would go unconscious again. And then I'd wake up again with them shaking me to like breathe. And then I'd go unconscious again. And that's when they had to use epinephrine to get me like to fully stabilize. And so I had to spend extra time in recovery. And then after the recovery, I was given my phone and I opened my phone and the first text message I see is from him telling me that he cares about me as a friend. No way it's mine. I hadn't been with anybody else in so long, you guys. And so I knew without any doubt in my mind that this was his baby, right? There was no question. And so it was just so painful to me that he would say something like that to me. And so this nurse comes up to me and she tells me while I'm in recovery that I've got angels surrounding me, that I should not have made it out of that one. And she's just like, you got angels surrounding you, girl. And it was a very sweet, nice thing to say. But at the moment, it was not what I wanted to hear. Because in that moment, I just wanted to. So feeling the way that I felt, I knew that I wasn't safe to be home alone. And so instead of staying at home and recovering, I would go to the bar that was next to my old job where all of my coworkers still worked. And I just couldn't be alone. And so I would go there and I'd wait for them to get off work and so I can hang out with them. And remember, guys, I wasn't really a drinker in our friend group. I was the non-drinker in the friend group. I'm going to tell you something about your friends here. It's one thing when you're going through a hard time and like a breakup and your friends are like, let's go get distracted and go to a bar and get drunk. And they get drunk with you and you guys have a good time and, you know, just to help you forget about it. Like, that's totally acceptable and something that a lot of people do, normal people do, I've done. And it's also totally normal too. Like, even if you're not going through a hard time, for you to go get drunk with your friends and post it on Snap of you guys having fun and being goofy, whatever. Totally normal, not a problem. But if your friends are witnessing you going through one of the most traumatic events of your life, and you are clinging on to life, and they are encouraging you to get blackout drunk, encouraging you to drink more, and then recording you and putting it on social media, and then showing people at your old job the next day, showing your old bosses, showing your ex-boyfriend, showing your ex-coworkers, gossiping about you, finding out from random people that you don't even talk to anymore at the office, pinging you, messaging you saying, oh yeah, this person told us this. Is this true? Did this really happen? Those are not your friends. Those are not your friends. Waited until I was in a position of being unable to stick up for myself. My best friend out of the entire group, me and this guy used to sit in the car every single day after work and hang out and talk about like politics, about stuff in the office, just talk. We were like best friends. And he just completely stonewalled me. I mean, just stonewalled me. And the worst part about it is this guy just went through a breakup a couple months before, like 2 months before. And I liked his girlfriend because he was my best friend. I, without question, took his side. And I was mean and cold to this girl. I deleted her on my social media. I just completely shut her out for no reason. I had nothing against this girl, but because he was my friend, I felt like as his friend, that's what I was supposed to do. And man, did I learn my lesson there. Instant karma came right back around to me. They went and created a new group chat without me, but didn't tell me and didn't delete the old one. So I would be in the group chat, like sending messages and memes, and nobody would respond, but they would see it. So I could see that they was like seen, but they wouldn't respond. All the whole time they're in another group chat now. Or for example, when I would get to the bar where everybody would hang out after work, and I would walk up to them and they're standing in their group in the, you know, in the parking lot, I would walk up to them and he would just like go and walk away. And I just didn't understand why. I don't know what I did, you know, and I understand, you know, some people when they're going through breakups, they can be pretty exhausting, right? They're constantly coming to you for advice. They don't listen to your advice and they get themselves in the same situation again. And then they're crying to you again, right? I know how exhausting that can be. And it's okay to set boundaries with people in those situations. It's okay to be like, look, I know you're going through a hard time, but maybe it's not a good idea for us to like ruminate on it. Let's talk about something else. Let's not talk about this anymore. It's just going to make it worse. Or it's okay to just like completely set boundaries and be like, I'm really sorry, but I just cannot handle this emotionally right now, right? And that's totally acceptable and okay thing to do. But it is not okay to just completely stonewall your friends, your best friend, who was just there for you. And the worst part about it is I would ask my friends, like, hey, why is he treating me like this? Why is he being like this with me? And they would tell me like, oh, Jenny, he's just really worried about you. He cares about you. And, you know, he's just very worried about you. And I was like, that's not how you treat somebody you care about, you know? So not only am I dealing with the fallout of everything that has just happened to me, I mean, fresh out of the hospital, in absolute emotional turmoil, and now I'm being ostracized by my friend group. And I know some of you guys are probably thinking she was probably being an energy vampire, or she was probably being completely impulsive or getting them into situations or doing crazy things. No, none of that was happening. I was just being mean to myself, really. Just being depressed. I understand if this was like a pattern for me, or I was constantly a person in crisis and they just couldn't take it anymore. The person in the group that was always making people laugh. I have always been known to have a very goofy personality, constantly making jokes and being silly. I was so devastated. I mean, they killed that energy in me. They killed that light. I was not the same person after this. It was like this bright light. And he completely doused that light with water, and then they threw the sand on it. I completely cut everybody off. I isolated myself completely, and I just started really working on myself and my career. I got another job where I was making even more money, and at this point put myself up into the 6-figure range. And I just was like working on my body. I was just trying to be this bad bitch. That was like how I thought I was going to heal. Was I was just going to be this bad bitch that was better than all of them, better than everybody that treated me this way. I wanted to be above them. And no matter how far down that line I got, I still was not healing. And that stupid profile was still there on my people you may know, in my face, like teasing me in my face. And so I began to get very angry and like messaging the page, talking shit to it. Like, I know it's you, you piece of shit. You ruined my life. I'll never be able to be happy. But then at the same time, I would reach out to try to be on good terms again with him, because I still could not accept the fact that he was as cruel to me as he was. And I thought maybe if like we're cool, he'll apologize. That didn't help out at all. And then one day I was with my friend at the Cheesecake Factory, and I saw him getting kicked out of the Cheesecake Factory. In the moment, I felt like really sad for him, and that his life just like obviously wasn't going very well. And he's the last person in the world I should have any sympathy for, but I did, and I felt really bad. And then I went home and I just like broke down, and I thought I was getting better, but I just was not. And I got angry with myself for feeling bad for him, and I just fell even deeper. And after about a couple months, I felt like I just needed to completely escape all of it, right? Just completely deleted my social media presence, deleting like all of the pictures and deleting him as a contact on my phone. And I kept obviously the text messages in case I ever needed them as like proof, you know. As a matter of fact, I had to go into my old Snapchat that was still deleted from when I deleted my social media to even get a lot of these videos and pictures for this video. During this time frame, I really started to improve. I started really working on myself, not just money and things like that, but working on my mental health, doing things for myself, getting into like weightlifting and, you know, doing fun things with my kid and just really living a peaceful, happy life. I was really starting to feel like myself again. Not the same person though. And I never became that same person again. But I started to feel better, and I felt like a completely different person. Like I matured in ways that I didn't know that I needed to mature. Lost a lot of that, I want to almost say innocence that I had. But a lot of it I don't think was innocence. I just think I was a terrible people pleaser. Chose not to involve myself with coworkers in that type of relationship outside of work. I haven't really tried to make any new friends since all of this. I really just stick to myself. And so after about I want to say like a year and a half of everything, I reactivated my social media, and almost like immediately my first love reached out to me, because me and him have kept in touch over the years. We just had like 2 separate lives, children, you know, relationships and things like that. And so it was just never the right time. And so me and him ended up going to lunch, and we started dating. And I was very, very scared, obviously. But if I'm going to trust anybody, it's going to be the one guy that I dated in my life that was not somebody who had violated me in some way, shape, or form. Right? Him and I became serious, and I decided to move up to the Pacific Northwest. And I moved up here with him, and we got married and blended our family. And I got pregnant on my honeymoon, and now we have a beautiful, crazy toddler who you've probably heard in the background. And my life, I can say, is very chaotic. I have 5 kids, and it's a blended family. Blessed, I get to work from home, and you know, my husband's got a good job. We've got a great life. We live in a nice neighborhood. All of our needs are met, and I can honestly say that my life is something that I never imagined I would be able to have. I have been so blessed since all of this happened. I feel like that was a chapter in my life that was closing, and this was a new chapter in my life that was opening. And it was just like a completely different life for me. And I'm sometimes, because of the trauma I've been through, I'm very hypervigilant, and I get very afraid that I'm going to lose this any minute. Like any minute, this is all going to be gone. But that's, you know, why we go to therapy, right? But anyways, so I got sick a month ago or 2 months ago, and I had this horrible nightmare. And in this nightmare, I was in a dungeon almost. Like it was like an abandoned like horror movie office, because I had like the tiles that you can, you know, pop up, right? Like a corporate office environment. And all my friends were there, and I was just trying to fucking escape them. I was like, get me away from these people, get me away from them, and talking shit. And I was just like, I need to get the fuck out of here. And so I try to go up, and I see that I could see the outside, and I could see like a 7-Eleven on the street, but I can't get out the way. So I go the other way, and there's the dentist, and he's like covered in fire. Kind of like, remember Anakin? And I don't remember which Star Wars it is, so I'm not a huge Star Wars person. Anakin is like fighting, I think, Obi-Wan McGregor, right? And he's like halfway on fire, and he's like, fuck you. And I was like, fuck, let me get away from this guy, right? So I'm like trying to escape him as he's like crawling like this. And then I end up in another room where he's in there with a bunch of women. And he's just like fucking making a mess, throwing drinks at them, ashing on them. And I'm just going around trying to clean it up. I was spooked. I told my husband, I told my therapist, I was like, what the fuck, you know? And so I hadn't revisited any of this in these years, because not because it was just like too painful, but because I was like, what for what? Why fucking revisit it? Why ruminate on it, you know? And so I never got the opportunity to completely revisit the story without those rose-tinted glasses of a trauma bond. And, you know, after talking to my therapist, she's like, you know, it sounds like what you went through was narcissistic abuse. And I had been told that before. And so I now was looking at it through a different lens. And so I revisited the story and everything that had happened with the new lenses on. And it became so clear to me, so clear, everything he did. I had no idea. Like the whole time I just thought that I was in love with my dentist and I really wanted to be with him, and I put myself out there and maybe I pressured him. And that's why. And he felt guilty and I pressured him and it was my fault. And then I remembered all of the flirting, all of the little comments he made, the positions he put me in, having me write nice reviews about him, asking me, you know, asking me to tell him nice things about him, things that I like about him, just overall the behavior in the first 6 months while I was his patient, and how that really groomed me to believe that I was special and that we had something. And then to spend the following 6 months tearing me apart, me feel like I wasn't worthy of him, and then ultimately discarding me like I was trash. This man knew what he was doing the whole time. Dentists, doctors, teachers, therapists, they are all trained on transference and what that looks like. They are required to take an oath to do no harm. This man knew what he was doing. And you might say, you saw the red flags from the beginning and you ignored them. And that is true. And like I said, I take my accountability there. I was a vulnerable person. I was a very vulnerable person. And people like narcissists and abusers, they target vulnerable people. Just like children are targeted for being vulnerable. Elderly people are targeted for being vulnerable. It's not okay to target people who are vulnerable. If you have not gotten the help and the therapy that you need to recognize the trauma you've been through and where those patterns lie, you are not going to see it because it's subconscious. You don't realize what's happening to you until you get that help. And so once you see those patterns and once you've gotten that clarity, it is on you from there to heal and get better. But before that happens, to blame that person for being exploited, it's not their fault. And it's not fair that I'm the one that should be expected to feel shame for what happened to me. I'm the one should be embarrassed. I'm not the one that should feel shame. He should. This is his shame. And I'm not going to hold it anymore. If you've ever survived narcissistic abuse or breadcrumbing or betrayal trauma, you know what it's like to lose yourself quietly, piece by piece. But one day, peace starts to feel familiar. You laugh easier, you love safer, the past no longer owns the room. I found healthy love. I built a family, I reconnected with what I thought I had lost, and now I get to raise a little girl in the kind of safety I once prayed for. Healing doesn't erase what happened to me. It just proves that my life isn't over. You can still create something beautiful out of what tried to break you.